We're going to start off with a presentation first by a gentleman, Chris Haig, who's from the Department of Defense. And he's going to give us about a 10 to 15 minute walkthrough of a really interesting use of mobile commerce that the Defense Department has been using. And after that, we'll get back together and have a round of questions. So,
good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight to speak. It's a pleasure and an honor. Again, my name is Chris Haig. I'm from the U.S. Department of Defense, based out of the Pentagon, but I spend a lot of time in Iraq, now Afghanistan, and also a lot of time on an airplane somewhere in between there. So we did notice, though, another problem that was occurring. So as we step back, the banks were accepting these SWIFT transactions, and the payments were, making their way to the banks, but the vendors were all taking all of the money out of the banks. So the cash was essentially going back out onto the battlefield. So, we looked at this and said, okay, we looked at this from a supply side, but we need to now look at this from the demand side. What can we do to get them to keep the money inside these banks? Because it was also helping to recapitalize the banks, build up the deposit base, build up the account base in these banks, so that we as a donor community stopped giving them money to actually work on projects, and you were sending vendors to actually go to banks to actually now get loans from these institutions that they were taking deposits from. One of the biggest successes in Iraq has been the mobile network deployments over the last several years. They went from having 0 subscribers in 2003 to, I think they're over, it's about 16 million subscribers right now in a country of just under 30 million people. So, I mean, the uptake in this had been massive at that point. So we saw an opportunity here to leverage the retail payments infrastructure, or to leverage the mobile networks that exist in the country to be the foundation for the retail payments infrastructure to be put in place. Just helping them actually leapfrog other places and say, here's an opportunity in the West. Having come from the telecommunications space, we talked a lot in the past as we were deploying 3G networks about how everyone was going to have mobile banking applications in their wallet or on their phone in 2000, 2001, and so on and so on. So it's kind of ironic now that we're actually doing things here with the Iraqis, and they're actually putting these things in place, learning from some of the other telco-driven applications that have been put in place.
What I'd like to do now is introduce our moderator for this session. Gentleman by the name of David Eads, would you just come up here? Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Good. He's going to take us through. David's from a company called Mobile Strategy.
So I'm going to start from left to right here. David Euchre from Sybase 365. Can you come on up here?
My background is really in financial services, primarily in electronic payments, both on the vendor side, actually primarily on the vendor side, receivables processing, et cetera. I came most recently from another mobile banking company and have been at Sybase 365 for all of, it's a long period now, 2 months, so, but very familiar with the space, so glad to be here.
Thanks. My name is Sarah Overcash. I'm from SunTrust Bank. I've been with the bank for over 11 years now, and I was part of the team that implemented our current mobile solution back in November of 2007.
I'm with a company called First Data. Most people don't have any idea who First Data is, and we generally like that. We stand behind many banks that do payment processing. We're the world's largest payment processor. So if you have a credit card, a debit card, a prepaid card in your wallet, it's a good chance our company had a hand in doing it.
And I'm with OblePay, and we are smaller than First Data. I assure you. We're the first mobile money service in the United States. We are active in three countries on 3 continents. It sounds strange, but we're operational in the United States, India, and Kenya.
So in the developing world, it seems that they've been able to leapfrog us as far as mobile money movements via mobile phones. So I guess starting with Chris.
And this was done by simple solutions. Sometimes, the initial implementations in developing markets were focused on, people trading minutes on cell phones rather than just money and treating that as a currency. I think in the U.S., and again, I'm not an expert in the U.S. market, but you're going to see this kind of come from the other end, from the mobile banking side of things, where the smartphone space will probably take off first, where people are going to have an application on their phone. They'll be able to look at their balance online, and you add more and more features to that afterwards. So nobody here is kind of saying, I wish I could send money tomorrow on my phone while I'm moving, right? I mean, it'd be a nice feature to have, but would someone pay for that? How are you going to, what's the Trojan horse you're going to use to get into that market?
When we talk about mobile banking, I think it's a bit of a misnomer, because I think it's better to call it mobile in banking. Because when you think about the market today, I would argue, has been fairly well defined by the leading vendors and some of the leading banks in terms of what retail customers expect and how they will use the mobile device, which is primarily around account access and alerts, alert-driven account access and management, replicating a lot of the basic functionality of online. But that's just a small part of how this channel can be used for retail banking across the lines of business of the bank. And then when you step outside of this notion of having it focused on account access and management and think about it as a tool for account acquisition, growing deposits, et cetera.
In terms of looking at it at an enterprise solution, the mobile channel isn't just about banking, it's about payments, it's about commerce, it's about mobile marketing. And so from the banking perspective, it's really important for us to lay that infrastructure out. And that's a very lengthy process sometimes. We've gone through major mergers and acquisitions over the years, have some antiquated systems. And so it's really important to put that infrastructure in place to be able to use the mobile channel appropriately in the future.
So Barry, where are we going?
So if I had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be here. But so my perspective on where it's all going to go is that fundamentally I believe that everything that you do with a leather wallet, everything that you do from a PC will converge to the electronic equivalent on a mobile handset. And actually I should correct myself and call it a mobile device, because with the advent of the iPad and more devices like it coming in the future, I think it's going to be about mobility. It's not just necessarily going to be about a handset and a telephone. But that means making payments at retail stores. It's going to be about checking your account balance. It's going to be about getting location-based services. So,
a couple things to consider when you had asked about the developing versus developed markets. It's inevitable that you see this leapfrog effect. We saw it in Latin America many, many years ago when we first heard that there were more mobile phone numbers than landlines, right? And we'll see that continue. I think that there's a perspective, particularly in the U.S., that we're somehow significantly further behind than a lot of other countries, and that's mainly only true of when you compare to like Japan or Korea and some of these areas that have a sort of a different approach to all this. But I do think that the challenges in the U.S. in particular are going to be bringing together the ecosystem of players to actually do this in the right way. If you think about it. Millions of Americans just a few months ago sat on their couch and sent money to the Red Cross for Haiti relief. And when they sent that money to the Red Cross, their banks weren't involved. That's an anchoring thing that happens.
Near field communication it's a standard in the financial services industry using RFID and contactless technology.
And I would just like to add, I mean, it's one of those things where we as a vendor been prepared to do this. We've got technology capable and compatible with this, but really have not had significant demand from the marketplace yet, at least in the Americas.
I agree that it's going to be a slow progression. I think it's several years away before we get to NFC, and that just the growth of mobile banking needs to continue to educate consumers about thinking about their mobile device as part of their wallet. And I think going from mobile banking to mobile payments to NFC is a natural progression for consumers.
I agree with that, with two things for the group to otherwise consider. Number one is this little company in Cupertino, California called Apple. And if that little company decides that the next generation of iPhone has contactless or near-field communication technology embedded in it, it is going to be a wild race to enable NFC.
I think that we understand that the opportunities for security lapses exist all around us.
Any other comments? With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob.
Yes, thanks. Thank you.